after you attempt to try to get this, negotiated, resolved, and if you're unsuccessful and they want to stay in their keyboard warrior world, then you need to activate your posse of positivity, if you will, where they can go out and just say, my experience was, or it's like flood the zone with additional positive reviews because it's just a math equation.
Yeah.
It's like you're not addressing the emotion. What you're doing is you're impacting the average rating. And it just, sooner or later, you'll push that 1-star review down the page. And then,
And if you don't ask for the review, you're never going to get it.
Welcome back to MasterMined. I'm your host, Mark Scrivner, and today I'm joined by my fabulous co-host, Jeff Skillen with Skillset Enterprises.
Hello, Mark. It's always great to be here.
Great to have you on the show today, Jeff.
Thank you. You bet.
And Lee Pepper, author of Never Outmatched. Lee, great to have you as well.
Good morning, Mark. You see, Jeff, how we just slow it down a little bit? Because Mark is shot out of a cannon today to talk about reputation management. I'm so excited.
Hey, this is going to be a great show. From 1-star reviews to 5-alarm PR fires. I know you all have faced all of that, and I'm so excited about digging into it on this episode.
We're excited about 5-alarm fires.
Oh, Jeff, you've told me some stories. I can't wait to dig into them. But
this morning I was on the phone with you, and there were sirens that were passing you, and about 10 minutes later, did you hear the sirens passing me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they're on our way to Snapshot this morning.
Really?
They knew what we were going to be talking about, clearly.
So, just getting into the show, though, why is reputation such a high-value asset for a behavioral health organization?
You want to jump in on it?
Sure. Well, because to my opinion is that because it's more real. A lot of times, Jeff and I are involved with branding and website design and SEO, and a lot of that is very organized. Whereas reputation, it's somebody has generally been upset about something and they want to go and make a comment on it. So, and I think people that read those feel like they're more honest and sincere when maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But I think that's the general feeling.
Well, and there's another angle to it also, because think about the people who work in these fields and they build these programs. When they get a negative review, it hurts them personally. So it's like, how many times do you get those phone calls where they're like, we worked really hard with person X and we did all that we could. How could they possibly do what they did in terms of writing a bad review? And so it's more than just, we look at it maybe from a lead generation standpoint because we live in that world, but they take this so personally because they know how much they tried to help people. And this is more than just I had a bad meal at a restaurant. I need to let people know. It's because they take such pride in what they do, and it impacts them. So they get a negative review and they just feel it in a different place.
Yeah. What are some of the most common reputational risks that you guys are seeing today in the organizations you're working with?
I think from my perspective is that people don't have a documented approach as to how to handle reviews. And these are, Jeff and I both have processes where, we work to create that documentation. One that I created was called DRAW, Discover, Research, Answer, and Work It Out. And it's also available in my book. But I think part of the issue is there's so many hands that can get involved in reviews. And so what ends up happening is a lot of organizations feel paralyzed. It's like they make assumptions. Oh, I thought marketing was handling reviews. Oh, I thought PR, or I thought the clinical director, and then really nobody is doing it. And so I think it's really important for organizations to have a good, hard, honest look to say, okay, who is going to be responsible for discovering, researching, answering, and then working out the problem. There needs to be one point of contact for that. There's going to be multiple departments that could be involved in it, but you have to have that one point of contact that's going to be responsible and doesn't feel attacked when there's a negative review. That's the other thing.
Lee's point is really is right on target here, because that's what eliminates this emotional response. If you have a process or a documentation to fall back on, that doesn't take the sting out of it, but at least you know what that next action is. And you can follow that, and then people are like, okay, it doesn't feel good, but at least we know what we're going to do, as opposed to this is going to hurt for 24, 36, 48 hours and you've missed the window.
Yeah. What happens if I'm a CEO and I get a scathing 1-star review? What is the general practice, the best practice that you guys?
Well, I think
help?
generally what happens is people get mad. They call people like Jeff and I got this one story. They probably maybe yell and scream at their staff when really that should not be what happens. There ought to be an organized you have to have the process. And to me, part of the reason that I came up with this draw concept was to try to educate the CEO, the C-suite, as to, okay, here's how this happens. The research is super important because you cannot assume that they're fake, right? You most of the time when in foundations we had thousands of reviews, so it was kind of easy to kind of help create this process. But once you start researching what the complaint is, you will be surprised that there's usually a grain of truth. It's not always, oh, the person was crazy or there's usually a grain of truth. And once you get all the suspects involved as to tell me what happened, you then quickly realize, okay, what your answer should be and then how you can work it out. And we'll Jeff and I can share some specific examples of how we did that. But I think the research part is really important. Don't just assume that they are being unreasonable.
So Lee, let me back you up for just a minute because I agree with that approach completely, but there's something that needs to be in place first, and that is a culture of curiosity as opposed to a culture of blame. And if your organization quickly looks to CYA, we all know what that means.
Yep.
Cover your backside. Or are we really curious about, is there truth here? And then are we going to follow a process? Because if your example, the CEO sees a 1-star review, well, the CEO shouldn't be the first one to see it, okay? And so then a quick test of your culture is like, how quickly does bad news travel? And if people try to hide, shield, bury bad news, that's a real tip-off that your culture is one of blame. And people want to avoid blame and potential, it's like, is my job in jeopardy or is this going to look bad on me or whatever? Whereas the best organizations that follow a process, they approach this with curiosity and say, look, we're dealing with human beings. They have complex things going on. The work we do is hard. We are going to have friction in this space. Let's be curious about what causes this friction and let's learn and grow from that.
And, Jeff, there is, I think, a lot of programs that want to deny the multitude of platforms that people are commenting on.
Right.
And so just because you haven't claimed your Yelp account doesn't mean people aren't commenting on Yelp about your program and that is seen by the general public. Same thing with Google, same thing with Facebook.
Well, listen, don't forget Reddit now.
Well, Reddit, absolutely.
So the interesting thing about Reddit, and I think a lot of people who are listening or watching may not realize, is how heavy a weight Reddit has in terms of authority and reputation as it pertains to Google. And in my opinion, it's unfair because that works in more of a consumer-driven, brand-driven as opposed to sort of a healthcare-driven space where when it comes to Reddit, it's like there's not a ton you can really do. We'll get to some things that you can do, but it's like it's almost as though the weighting that Reddit has on your reputation score is the same across all industries. And, that puts us in the healthcare field, especially in the behavioral healthcare field, at a tremendous disadvantage.
I have a client in Australia, and when we were discussing reputation management, in my research, I had come across video reviews that were done and posted on TikTok. They had no idea.
Yep.
They just assumed, well, we're not on TikTok, so it's like, okay, you may not as a company be on TikTok, but your customers are, and they are commenting.
Right.
And so it kind of opened their eyes. And I love to use it as an example. Just because you're not doing it doesn't mean everybody else isn't.
And one of the reasons that I want to stay on Reddit and TikTok and things like that, for example, is because a lot of organizations, when they think about marketing, they think that leads or communication flows in only one direction. It's like it only flows towards us so that we could admit people. Where the flip side is like there's a big wide world out there, and there are comments and there are topics and there are items that are trending that impact our industry, and you need to stay on top of what those trends are. You can't have this myopic, narrow view about what's going on. Like perfect example when Paris Hilton put out her documentary about her experience in let's just say adolescent treatment and punitive adolescent treatment and what she experienced. It came from nowhere, unless you were paying attention. If you were paying attention, you knew this was brewing, you knew this was coming, and you were already developing a defensive strategy to make sure that you didn't get hit with the shrapnel of that story. But unfortunately, far too many programs, when Paris Hilton decided, I mean, she's still on the soapbox, basically, of I'm going to ruin programs that treat teens in a certain way. And I'm going to go out of my way to then try to obliterate that aspect of care. And it's like, that's controversial in and of itself, but she's got the platform to do it.
Yeah.
Right. So then how do you respond to that? That's a PR nightmare that landed on your doorstep that you never asked for.
Well, I mean, just staying on the same track. So I'm the CEO. I want the review gone. Okay. Are there tactics that that you've used or that you've seen that has been helpful of getting those reviews taken down, either by the individual that left it or by Google or whoever the platform is?
Well, the first thing I would say is that if you're the CEO or the owner of a company, you cannot demand that any platform is going to remove a review. So don't put that pressure on your team. That's where the work it out part of Draw really, I think, comes into play. And I want to use two examples. One, Jeff is very familiar with this one. When Jeff was consulting with us at Foundations, we had a negative review at Michael's house, 1-star review. Once we got the review, we confirmed that the story was true by looking at our electronic health record. We saw that this person was a patient. I personally called and spoke to the mother who had left the review, and we quickly found out that her complaint was because her son had taken her Louis Vuitton bag, and it was, you're only allowed one bag. He brought two. They checked it. Well, the bag was lost. 30 days later, when her son was coming home, the bag was lost. So he shows up without her bag. And the situation got exacerbated because she made multiple attempts to contact the facility and nobody responded. And it was because she was getting routed via the phone system, to the head of housekeeping, and nobody was returning her call. Once I called the CEO, Krista Gilbert, she confirmed the whole story. The bag was probably stolen. We could never confirm, but it was definitely missing. And she agreed to reimburse the mother. And we didn't ask any questions. We did not. It was not a quid quo. It was not a quid pro quo. We said, we're going to send you this money. We sent the money, and she changed her 1-star review to a 5-star review. So that's the work it out part. It's not always going to be able to be worked out, but that was a case. I also had a second case very recently with one of my clients where a person left a very negative review, and we did the research and found out that there was a familiar relationship there between that person who left the negative review. So we just asked that person that was related, would you mind just reaching out and figuring out what can we do to work this out? And that person agreed to take the review down and said, you know what, I was just a hothead. I was frustrated. And just having that ability to go the extra mile, it doesn't guarantee 100%, but I would almost guess that half the reviews that I've been involved with have been resolved just because we were willing to make some connection offline. Not responding online.
Correct.
And,
that was the other key thing that I was going to point out is, I mean, let's recognize the dynamic here. The negative review is really the result of this keyboard warrior dynamic, where chances are, if you were to speak to them in person or to get them on a phone call, the things that they put in writing would almost never be said to your face or on a phone call. Right. So to Lee's point, I do agree that if you follow this procedure, a large percentage of these reviews will either be taken down by the poster, or they'll put out a subsequent review where they'll address it. The other thing that I think that we all struggle with the 1-star review, and we struggle with the really negative review, but we often forget the positive reviews that we do have, right? And it is a simple mathematic formula. I mean, it is just an average of the numbers of stars that you have. So the other way to play this game is that you should have a posse of people that after you attempt to try to get this, negotiated, resolved, and if you're unsuccessful and they want to stay in their keyboard warrior world, then you need to activate your posse of positivity, if you will, where they can go out and just say, my experience was, or it's like flood the zone with additional positive reviews, because it's just a math equation. Yeah. It's like you're not addressing the emotion. What you're doing is you're impacting the average rating. And it just, sooner or later, you'll push that 1-star review down the page. And then,
And if you don't ask for the review, you're never going to get it.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing. Like you need to have a process where you're comfortable, asking, for the now there. I think there can be policies about when you do that, but there are lots of ways to do it.
But
Either through your alumni, but there needs to be a consistent message, and people should not be afraid. I've gone into a lot of programs, and they want to say, "Well, that's not my job." Or I don't feel comfortable doing that. You don't feel comfortable asking somebody to share the good news, maybe 6 months or a year after? I mean, why not?
Yeah.
Because if your goal and your intention is to really help and you feel like your program is that answer, then you just part of it is just having the conversation and not waiting till you have to react to the negative review. Let's go ahead and have this conversation now when things are positive and we're kind of getting that cycle going.
Well, and let's point out, I know that we're belaboring the point, but nobody likes to really think about a plan in advance, but it is far better to have this plan in advance. It's like you don't want to be thinking about evacuation when the tornado siren goes off, right? It's like you want to already know what you're going to do, so that way you're going to do it.
Yeah.
So this idea of you're going to engage the positivity posse, for example, is like you already know who these people are. And it's like you've already had these conversations and you've already been like, there's going to come a time where I might ask you to do something. Would you be willing to do it? And they've already said yes. Because if then you're going through, your alumni list and you're like going, well, Larry had a good experience and Susie had a good experience, I'm going to call them at that point. The problem is your need is now. Your plan needs to be already in place. And so, I know that we really stress proactive planning a lot, but it really will ameliorate or reduce the stress in the situation if you've already got this kind of dialed in.
Yeah. Guys, what I'm taking away, though, as we leave the reviews, don't put your head in the sand and let those reviews stay out there. Be proactive. Reach out to the people. Try to talk them through the situation and find out. It's a great educational, opportunity for the programs to learn, like, what could we do better? And, those simple little things about the bag that got stolen, that's why they left a review. That's powerful. And then also on the flip side, asking for reviews and it being a part of the process so that it doesn't seem unnatural, like that it doesn't seem like, hey, we're just soliciting, a bunch of reviews here. It's a part of our process that we go through.
And I think a third leg of that, Mark, is that all of the platforms have their own policies and procedures.
Right.
And there were many times where the review violated either Yelp or Facebook or Google's review policy, but they don't necessarily know that unless you as the company owner flag it.
Yeah.
So you need to have somebody in your organization that has some expertise or at least ownership in that, so that when they do see the review, there might be, if you think about, if you got 10 negative reviews, if you can take care of half with the work it out process, and then if you've got, another 1 or 2 of those 5 remaining that you've addressed because they violated terms and conditions, now you're down to only maybe 2 or 3 negatives. Right? And maybe those are the ones that you answer online instead of just freaking out with 10 negatives. And I think that's where when Jeff and I can start to explain this to the business owner, then all of a sudden that starts to lower the anxiety level and okay, we can really address this in a more proactive way.
Yeah. And Jeff, you were getting ready to go there, but just talking about like an effective communication strategy around this, an effective crisis communication plan.
Right.
And then also like what does the framework of that look like? And then who all should be on that team that can execute on that strategy?
Well, okay, so let's talk about what that scenario actually looks like, because we need to recognize that we are in an industry that has sort of a hair trigger, if you will. It's like at any moment, some story could happen that could ignite a national story. And we're not, my background prior to getting into healthcare and behavioral healthcare was in entertainment. And so I'm very sensitive to the fact that, one misaligned comment to some stringer in Iowa City can easily end up on the front page of the New York Times, or it could actually run a news cycle for 24 hours. It's like it can. And so we're also in an industry where it doesn't happen as often, but it could. And so then again, that's where a plan really will help you a lot. So like, for example, I like to work with the organization and say, when the New York Times calls, what do you do? When 60 Minutes calls, what do you do? And most people are like, well, they're never going to call. I mean, that's really never going to happen. I'm be like, we still need to have a plan, right? And and the rule of thumb is like, and I'll answer your question in terms of who should be on that team and all this sort of stuff. But I mean, the one thing that I would highly recommend that people never do is say no comment. And that is the sign of a very unsophisticated thinking about this situation. It's natural and it's a very human response where all of a sudden it's like, wow, I'm being contacted by the national media, and it's like I need to say something. And the answer is, it's like you let that call go to voicemail unless you've already picked up, and you have a media savvy individual respond to that phone call, and you respond very quickly. So you respond within 5-10 minutes, ideally, if you can. But you need a media savvy person who's been trained in dealing with the media to return that phone call, because you're not going to know all the tricks and the traps that are even in the questioning because it's like what is likely to happen in that situation is going to be sort of like a cross-examination approach, which is, isn't it true that fill in the blank? We have information that indicates fill in the blank. How do you respond? That is normally the way that those inquiries tend to happen. And so a media savvy professional will take that situation and then invert that scenario and then launch your crisis response plan. So who should be on that team? First of all, your media savvy professional, your CEO. You need to have an attorney involved. And again, you don't necessarily want attorneys writing things for you, but they need to be engaged in, here's the potential risk scenario. And then what you want to do is you want to gather the information in terms of either what has occurred or how do we need to respond. And ideally what you want to do is you want to gather as much information as you can, and then you want to be able to then sync with that team and then either come back with a written response or decide how you want to put that information out there. And a media savvy person will know how to actually give you that breathing room to then be able to respond in a more effective way.
Yeah. Well, and I want to say on the team effort, I think I don't want people to hear this and go, oh my goodness, I've got to have a I am so sorry. I didn't know that was. For those of you listening, my alarm just went off for some reason.
So Lee's created.
I just created a PR nightmare. Don't give us a negative review. I am so sorry about that. So what I want to make sure is that people realize that when you're talking about, I think, reputation management reviews, a lawyer's not going to be involved in 90% of them.
That's right.
And so I think the very first consulting situation that you and I worked on at Foundations, Jeff, is that Jeff played that role with us, so that when we got media inquiries, we didn't have to think about who's going to handle it. They went to Jeff. And then Jeff would do he would do the first phone calls and then get back to us if we needed to respond. And I think for a lot of smaller programs, having a person like that, especially if it's a contractor, can be affordable and be very helpful. And then over time, we ended up getting Caitlin Pickrell, who kind of we recruited to kind of do that role. And then at the Meadows, we had Taylor Pope, who joined us. So at some point, when you start to get large enough, you start to bring on some of those people.
But rarely do organizations really have. It's like rarely is that a full-time individual. It's like that is a very specialized skill set to be able to deal with those scenarios. And Lee's, I don't bring, people mention attorneys. They're kind of like nuclear weapons. It's like, well, everybody's got to have one. Well, it's like, but the reality of it is, I'm speaking about a situation that is potentially explosive.
Well, we worked on Sentinel events.
Right.
We work in healthcare. Sentinel events happen.
Right.
And it's not because of some negligence. It's just that you're dealing with a sick population, and so you want to have a team that can handle those type of situations when they come up.
Yeah, I was going to say about the attorney. Anytime you bring them in at the very beginning, it is nuclear. Like it just takes it to a whole different level versus we have a chance to de-escalate this.
Right. Well,
challenge.
the way, again, that's why you have these conversations, these plans in place before they happen, because then it's like, just because someone is an attorney doesn't mean that this has to be adversarial. This is, I mean, a lot of times you need to approach it from a risk mitigation standpoint, as opposed to we're going to be aggressive, or it's like not at all.
Yeah.
It's like, this is more about how do we really understand what's going on and see what our exposure is.
And not to plug my book for a second or third time, but there is this aspect of war gaming that I talk about, and PR and reputation is another great aspect to apply wargaming, because you can just spend an hour with your team and say, what happens if we have a cybersecurity breach?
Right.
That's a pretty common thing these days. How are you going to handle it when you potentially have patient data out there? And you can go ahead and war game out. Okay, well, if that happens, here's what we do. Same thing with a Sentinel event. Same thing with a bad review on Yelp or Facebook. You can go ahead and have those lined out, documented in that scenario. And it doesn't have to be weeks on end. It can be done in a couple of hours. And then you just go every 6 months, maybe you go back and look at that. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be always crisis management.
Yeah, let's say there's a 5-alarm PR fire and it happens. And, I guess, what are some of the best practices you guys have seen of behavioral health leaders keeping the culture while they're going through this? Because you talked about, like, the word spreading fast in a good communicating company. Like, let's say this happens and it's out there and it's news. And how do you guys coach leaders on, the ability to keep the culture while going through that?
This scenario requires a skilled professional. Most people who are skilled at running an organization, or they're CEOs of an organization, that's their skill set. That doesn't mean that they have this skill set. So it requires a skilled, seasoned professional that knows how to de-escalate and bring the temperature down. And the rest of the organization will have confidence when they feel that go down. When they feel that temperature go down and they feel that pressure go down, that is going to allow people to exhale a little bit in that situation. And they're going to feel confident and comfortable that when it's appropriate to respond, we will respond appropriately. And that sounds very simple. It's really not.
But if you've practiced it,
right.
You've seen it before. You've already kind of gone through, and I think part of it too is don't shoot the messenger.
Right. Well, so I mean, Mark, let's just dig a little bit deeper, because part of this wargaming scenario that Lee's talking about is, you have an internal communication strategy and an external communication strategy. So what tends to happen is, like, everybody in the organization, they're all on social media. So if something is blowing up, it's like they're seeing it in all their news feeds, and they're seeing it, and all their text messages, and all the chatter is already going to happen. So don't pretend like it won't. It's already happening. So you take into account that in terms of your internal communication strategy, and you indicate, and again, I like to keep this really simple. You want to address this from a standpoint of saying what happened, what we're going to do about it, and then actually do it. And then we're going to report back in terms of what we've actually done. But it's a very clear-eyed, very clear, and people are going to know if you're really trying to spin them.
Listen, and if you think that the media, and this is on the PR side, if you think the media is not researching you, every time there's a celebrity issue or death, or there's a sports or something, they are calling in. They're talking. They're trying to figure out who they know in your company, because they're trying to figure out, was this person at that place or at this place? They're going through the whole list. And Jeff and I work with a lot of those type of companies, and it happens regularly where they're trying to figure out. They're trying to hone in on exactly what the last treatment was.
Right. So like if you work with high profile individuals, or people that are, and by the way, this could not necessarily be like celebrities. These could be Instagram influencers. This could be anymore, like, you need to be very savvy in terms of, like, people have hundreds of thousands of followers, and so then next thing you know, you've got somebody making a phone call, and they're like, it's like, I've got a package I'd like to deliver to so and so, and it's like, and what they're doing is seeking confirmation that they're there.
Yeah.
Right. And so then there's even this whole aspect about reminding people that HIPAA is more than just protecting your records. This is more than just protecting your EMR. This is protecting people's privacy from knowing that they're even there, which even makes it complicated in terms of responding to reviews and things like that. Because if someone basically puts their own information out there in a review, I am, or they can identify themselves or whatever, you are not able to confirm nor deny that they were under your care. So so even that requires a lot of sensitivity and skill in terms of the way to deal with that. Now, I don't want to scare people, but these are realities that it's like I do want the people that are listening to recognize that it's like, yes, these things can happen, and you need to have a plan. And they can and they do, and then there are ways to mitigate these things.
Yeah, well, you guys laid out a great roadmap, and having that plan in place is so important. But yeah, guys. I mean, I get it, and I'm busy right now. We'll get to it.
We'll get to it.
And let's just say that the 5-alarm PR fire happens, and I put my head in the sand. Have you guys seen, like, we don't need to call out the specific, like, organization, but what have you seen to be some of those bigger, like, 5-alarm fires that just blew up into a nuclear?
Okay, so I've got two potential responses to this scenario. One is hey, it's going to blow over. It's no big deal. I'm going to stick my head in the sand. Okay. The other one is to pop off too soon. The other one is to have someone who doesn't engage a media savvy professional, and they're like, "I got this." And I'm going to start with that example first, okay? Because here's what tends to happen. What tends to happen is they try to parrot what they see in the national media. And I can think of an example that I'm not going to name any names where a negative event happened, sentinel event happened, okay? They immediately tried to blame the authorities. They immediately tried to say, well, the people who are investigating us are out to get us. And it was just like straight out of the national news, where they see high-profile individuals thinking they can bend reality to their will, and they think that they're just as skilled in being able to spin a story. And that is paper thin, and everyone can see it, and you have just made your situation 10 times worse. Okay? So just because you see it on TV, or just because you hear it on the radio, or just because you think you understand a media strategy by parroting what other people do, that is a giant mistake. So that's one scenario, and I've seen that play out, and that is, everybody thinks that this is easy. Everybody thinks that you can get in front of a microphone and it's just easy, and you're going to say the right words, and you're going to do the right things. And the reality is, it is complicated, and every time I open my mouth, I'm thinking about what are the 3 repercussions, the 5 repercussions that could happen based upon what comes out of my mouth. That's what a media savvy individual thinks about. And it's not just what point do I want to make. It's literally like you're playing the chess match multiple steps down the road.
And I was going to add, a lot of work that Jeff and I do, we always encourage our clients to make sure they're recording their calls and listening and transcribing. And I think that when it comes to PR issues and reputation management, that gives you another platform where you can do research. So if you are doing that, you can go into your system like a call rail, and you can look up to see, is anybody referencing these negative reviews or this? And that can also help to educate like your response, right? Because if you've got this negative review that's shown up on, say, Yelp as an example, well, you'll want to deal with it, but it may not be the crisis you think, right? Because maybe nobody's calling in referencing it. So that can give if you're educating your C-suite as to, okay, here's what's happening, we're developing our response, and it may be a day or two. If you don't have that kind of education for your C-suite, that we've also been looking at our calls and nobody's referencing it yet, that can kind of help lower the temperature a little bit, so they know, okay, we've got 24 hours, 48 hours to kind of make sure we've got it all buttoned up.
The other thing, and Mark, I'm going to come back to your head in the sand scenario here in just a second, but I want to bounce off of what Lee just said there. So leadership needs to recognize that when your communications team comes to you with information, it may seem trivial. it may seem really small, and it may seem like, how could this possibly be a big deal? But I'm telling you, those are the brush fires that start things. And then if your communications team is bringing you this information and they're like, there's a lot of emotion behind a stolen bag, there's a lot of emotion behind such and such, it's like, it doesn't matter what the thing is. What matters is what's the thing behind the thing. And that's what you're ultimately going to end up responding to.
Yeah.
And you need to educate your admissions team and your business development team on your reviews, because you don't want them walking in to meet with a new psychiatrist about referrals and they pull you up and say, well, what about these negative reviews? Or your admissions team. Like, it needs to be out front. You need to be talking about it, and then what your plan is to deal with it. Because if you don't, you're making their job so much harder to overcome. We already do a lot of work with overcoming objections. You don't need to have a whole bunch of negative reviews to be adding to that list.
Yeah, I mean, so Mark, to go back to the and this dovetails with what Lee was just saying. The put your head in the sand, ignore it, it's going to go away scenario. That's akin to the no comment that I mentioned earlier, where New York Times calls or any media outlet calls, and your first instinct is like, I really don't want to deal with this, no comment. Okay. The reality of it is, when it comes to public relations, you need to think about, what does a reasonable person take away from this scenario? And if the first thing that they pick up on is they've got something to hide, or they don't want to address it, the human nature part of it is, I'm going to dig. The human nature of it is, it's like, I don't like being lied to, and there's something that they're not telling. So the answer in all of these scenarios is really, selective disclosure. But every time that you speak, it is completely transparent. So reveal what you can reveal with complete transparency. And then, then you always know that you're dealing in truth, and you're dealing in transparency. And when I talk about selective disclosure, that's really being informed by more of a risk scenario. Then it's not like you're hiding or spinning. It's just, you need to develop the fact that when I speak, I'm speaking the truth. And when I speak, I'm speaking transparently, right? Because otherwise, when you get to a mitigation or a repair scenario, no one is going to trust you. No one is going to believe you.
How about like 3 to 5 years from now? What do you think are going to be the biggest opportunities in this in reputation management? Like, what are the things you're thinking about, looking at, kind of planning for?
Well, for me, I think one of the biggest things is that, and we haven't really touched on this element of it, but you need to be responding to the positive reviews. A lot of times we get focused on responding to the negatives, but we need to have our staff, our alumni, our fans used to and educated on how they can interact with the positives. Because when you see that little thumbs up, thumbs down, like, it's important that we click that thumbs up. We like your answer. Like, we need to be answering the review, and we need to be training our team to interact, because that all goes into the algorithm, which we know is now being indexed with AI. And so if you wonder why in certain searches in Gemini or in ChatGPT or what have you, they're going to start bringing in some of these answers that might be answered in the review. And if you will participate in that and have your team participate in answering and liking and thumbing up, that's going to help educate these large language models as to, okay, this is relevant. But if we just sit there and don't do anything, or we haven't trained our staff, then we're going to wonder, and we're going to wake up one day and go, well, why are these not being incorporated? We got a lot of nice, good reviews here.
They're very important from an SEO, GEO standpoint of showing up.
Yeah.
I mean,
and I don't know if
positives.
I don't know if we've talked about this. This will be another episode where we talk about YouTube. But now YouTube, you can leave a video review within your comment. And like that's now, like, so Google and YouTube are telling you what the key elements are to be valued. Yelp and Facebook and Google, they're telling you, they give you the thumbs up, thumbs down. I mean, they're telling everybody, hey, here's how you can participate. These are important to us. But yet, for some reason, we don't do that.
Yeah.
So, all right, so this may be a little meta, but just I don't mean like meta as in Zuckerberg. This may be a meta comment, but just hear me out on this. One of the things that I'm gonna say, this is an opportunity and a threat. Okay, my concern is that we need to remember that at the end of the day, we're dealing with human beings. And so to Lee's point earlier on in this episode, where calling someone on the phone and having a conversation with them person to person is going to resolve many of your issues. The thing that I worry about is that a lot of people these days seem a lot more comfortable with I'm firing off a text or I'm going to fire off an email. And I worry that people either don't have the skill or they're not brave enough or skillful enough in their own communication to deal with a person on an individual level. And I'm afraid that where this is going is that the responses are going to be emails, text, AI generated, and you're missing the entire point. Because then at that point, it's like, this is just keyboard warrior warfare, and you're going to solve nothing. You're going to escalate the drama, and you're not ever going to get to the root cause. And so that really comes down to the art and the skill of actually engaging with a human being and recognizing that there's a rupture and a repair opportunity. And that comes down to human interaction. And you're not going to get that in an email, and you're not going to get that in a text message. So I see that as the risk, but I also see it as the opportunity to say that organizations that really work on this are going to be superior when it comes to, their reputation. Yeah.
Guys, I think we could do multiple episodes on this.
Yeah, we thought we were going to do this in 20 minutes.
No, it was very, very good. I appreciate all the insights. I know the audience will as well. That's a wrap on today's episode. On behalf of Lee, Jeff, and the entire MasterMined crew, I wanted to thank you for tuning in. Please rate, review, and subscribe to our channel so that we can get this message out to more people. Thank you again, and we'll see you next week.
That wraps up this episode of MasterMined. Thank you so much for joining us. And remember, MasterMined is not just a podcast, it's a community. So don't forget to comment, subscribe, and review us. Your feedback helps us continue to bring you content that's relevant and relatable. Thanks again to our sponsor, Snapshot, a digital media marketing agency. And thank you for joining us on MasterMined, your behavioral health playbook.